Hello and welcome to It's a Numbers Game. I'm Adam Morris, and as always, I'm joined by Dan Welling. Today's episode is one I'm genuinely looking forward to because we are tackling a topic that most MSPs don't spend much time thinking about. We're talking about hardware supply, margin, and availability, and these have all been under pressure for a while now. The pandemic exposed some cracks, Windows 10 end of life has added another layer, and behind the scenes, the supply chain is still far more fragile than many people realize. So rather than guessing, we wanted to bring someone onto the show who sits much closer to the reality of how this stuff actually works. So joining us today is Alicia Shepherd from Terra. Terra manufactures devices and distributes third-party hardware across Europe, which gives her a perspective most MSP owners don't normally see. She's been working in this space for a long time, understands how MSPs buy, sell and support hardware, and sees firsthand how global supply, component shortages, pricing and margin pressures actually play out. So in this conversation, we talk about what's really going on in the supply chain, why some of the current challenges exist, how MSPs should be thinking about device specification and refresh cycles, and what all of this means for margin and client expectations. Before we get into today's episode, just a quick mention of an event we're organising at MSP Finance Team. Our MSP Golf Day is taking place on the 12th of March at the Warwickshire. If you're an MSP owner or leader and you enjoy golf or simply value good conversations with like-minded peers, then this is for you. It's completely complimentary, includes dinner and prizes, and it's always a fantastic opportunity to connect with others in the MSP community in a relaxed setting. We're nearly at capacity, so if you'd like to join us, head over to mspgolf.co.uk to register. Hopefully see you there.
Alicia, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. How exciting.
Indeed. And we got into quite an interesting debate at a recent Brigantia event talking about a topic that's pretty dull and low on most MSPs' radar, which is good old product supply and the issues with supply, particularly around when the pandemic hit and more recently with the push for Windows 10 support cessation. So really interested to get your thoughts around this topic. And first of all, though, a lot of people get confused by what you actually are and what you do, because you're a distributor and a manufacturer. Am I using the right words there?
You certainly are. So we are most definitely a hybrid model, not just in the UK, but across Europe. So we have two strings to our bow, and both are equally as important. So we have the first string to our bow, part of the Wortmann Group, which is the Terra branded devices. So everything from an Android-based tablet right through to a high-end server. We then also have the distribution part, which, the likes of, your TD Synex, your West Coast, your Exertis. So everything from Ubiquiti, Jabra, Microsoft, we are distributing those brands. And it's something crazy like 10,000 plus other SKUs. So the scale is big. We're a €2 billion size organization.
Brilliant. I'm glad I probably don't have your sales targets then. And in the UK, I guess we probably know you more for the devices you produce, and help me understand the actual where you sit in the market against a HP, a Dell. What's your typical client look like, and why are they buying from you rather than HP products, for example?
I think to answer that question, so firstly, we are what everyone would class as a tier 2 brand, a challenger brand, for argument's sake. We're not an HP, Lenovo or Dell, but we have a place in the market. And there's quite a lot of tier 2s in the UK. And I think every single one of us will believe and want to deliver value to our customers. And in essence, over the years, I've been at Terra now for nearly 9 years. And it's all these acronyms, isn't it? As SMBs and SMEs have moved to MSPs, have moved to ITSPs, are now moving to MIPs. We'll just call them MSPs for this.
Yeah, sure, I know what a MIP is.
A managed intelligence provider.
Okay, all right.
This is I believe a PAX 8 is
that
is such a thing. I hope it doesn't become the thing, because otherwise I'm going to have to get new number plates for my cars.
And I'm going
Right.
to have to rename our
see.
business. I mean,
Oh yeah, and read out the business as well.
more importantly, Dan.
and-
Oh yeah.
And then you have GTIA have moved from MSPs to ITSPs. But
Yeah.
for this and for the sake of your number plates, we'll refer to the community as MSPs. And we've learned over that 9 years, as the MSP community has evolved, that as a vendor, as a direct supplier, obviously our MSPs buy directly from us, we have to change what it is that we're doing. It's no longer, I've got a notebook, I've got an LCD screen. Do you want to buy it? Thank you very much. Purchase order placed, and we ship the delivery. It's evolved way beyond that. And whilst, yes, we are selling tin, for argument's sake, I believe we are selling a solution. A solution, understanding from the MSP what are the challenges that they're facing right now. You know, buying hardware is a pain. No MSP really wants to be buying hardware. So it's about tapping into that, understanding what those challenges are, and giving us service and support that, yes, we can't remove the pain of you have to place an order for hardware because your client's device has gone down or they've got a new starter. But for the rest of that cycle, we like to think, we believe we take that sting out of the tail, we remove the pain from that process.
Alicia, could you just put a bit more background into the tiers side of it? You mentioned tier one, your Dell, your IBMs, HPs. I don't know who else would be up there. Who defines what tier one is? Is there some external standards around this, or do the tier one guys say we're tier one, and the tier two guys say we're tier two? Who defines this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real mixture. For my sins, many years ago, I worked for Acer, who were a tier one. I've still got some battle scars from that experience. The tier ones are very driven and motivated purely by market share. You know, when Acer knocked HP off the number one global spot for market share, you'd have thought we'd have all won the lottery. You know, it was bonkers excitement. They have that relationship. They have the global reach. Our reach is European. They have the reach into the likes of Intel, into the likes of Google, into the likes of Microsoft. So, for example, as a tier two, we don't get access to Chromebook technology. The tier ones do. The tier one's volume would absolutely dwarf what we're doing, because our model is different. And it's interesting because I still remember when Terra approached me to work for them. And firstly, you know, and I've been in the industry a long time, you know, so long I can remember selling single speed CD-ROMs. And what really excited me was that they don't focus on market share, that the focus is on delivering value. So the kind of mantra across all of the European subsidiaries is, we would rather sell 100 devices to 100 different MSP partners for them to experience the quality and the service and support that they get. So our model is not go and stack the boxes up high in, you know, an Amazon, for argument's sake, or, you know, an Ingram Micro or an Exertis, and then, you know, when they start knocking on the door and saying they're having to provision the stock because it's 90 days old, oh, well, that's fine. We'll write the stock down and flood the market. And what tends to happen in those cycles is they're not always selling the newest, latest, greatest technology because they're playing catch up every time. They've stocked up. Distribution is their warehouse. They don't have their own warehouse. So they have no choice but to say, you know, take 5 containers of these. You know, well, it's going to take 16 weeks for those containers to arrive. And you're going back to something that I said earlier, you know, about the market is moving, and it's moving so fast now, whether that's cyber, whether that's SaaS, whether that's devices. Nobody has a crystal ball. I would hate to be in the position where you are having to forecast 16 weeks out, but that you've got that committed purchase order from one of the, you know, big disties out there for 5 containers of whatever it might be. But that's very much, you know, it's defined by the market share. It's defined by the global reach and the sheer volume that these guys are shifting every single day.
And that all makes sense. Sorry, Dan, just to clear this up then. So they're obviously the tier ones hitting the market with their reach into the vendors, the volume, the choice, and you are coming at it from a different angle, which is around the relationship and the service. So just tell me a little bit more about what that means in reality.
So what that means in reality is we don't sell via online e-tailers, and that's choice. And that is simply because if an MSP is going to sell a Terra device, we want them to make margin on that product. The last thing we want is an MSP to say, we've tried to promote Terra, but you know what? My customer can go online and get it however much cheaper. That model just doesn't work. It doesn't satisfy anybody's requirements. The fact that we don't chase that market share, which I've covered with you, but also when we look at our proposition on service, we give our MSPs a choice that they want to service that kit themselves, and we will pay them for doing that. Because as an MSP, the relationship that you have with your client is you are going to keep that client up and running. Come hell or high water, that is your responsibility. That is in your MSP contract with that client. Do you want an outside source going into that client, whether they're from HP, Dell, whoever? They don't know your client. Are they sending their best engineer to client site? And again, this goes back to that, how we've evolved and we've been nimble, watching how MSPs are evolving themselves, what they want from a manufacturer. Not every MSP wants to go out and service, Terra kit, but I would probably say in the most part, 8 out of 10 do. And what's really interesting is, I'll have MSPs sit on a panel when we talk about our service partner program and how unique it is, that don't expect to get rich from fixing Terra kit because it doesn't go wrong all that often. I'd love to sit here and say it never goes wrong, but you'd laugh me off. Where there's technology, it can go wrong. So that's really our point of differentiation.
Be honest. When was the last time you actually felt in control of your MSP finances? The late nights chasing invoices, the cash flow stress, constant pressure to grow profit, it can feel never-ending. At MSP Finance Team, we've built the complete outsourced finance solution just for MSPs. From day-to-day bookkeeping to annual tax, management reporting, and full virtual finance team support, everything you need to run a profitable, stress-free business is under one roof. So whether you want to regain control, free up personal time, or finally build towards a real financial freedom, we can help you get there faster. Visit mspfinanceteam.com and discover how our outsourced finance team can help you stop surviving and start thriving.
And just reflecting on the way you've been describing the market, I guess probably if it wasn't for the execution of how Dell go to market, they would be the sort of in between, like a tier 1.5 to tier 2, insofar as obviously now more a tier 1. But that principle of being able to buy current stock, it's built and delivered to order, but the direct model conflict and therefore the erosion of margin is, of course, the challenge that most of MSPs have experienced with Dell. But the MSP community want to be able to sell a product that's going to have a good level of support available to it. We don't want to be building and buying tier 3, 4, or 5, if there is such a thing, just to be able to configure and buy at the right price. So it's that middle ground as far as I see it, and really interested to hear about the delegated service delivery model as well, because the points of friction that I always had with product supply were being able to make a margin, a sufficient one for the overhead of selling a product, and the natural risk associated with that. The second point of friction was being able to get support for that product. So I was always advocate buying the response committed warranty extensions, and effectively my client seeing the device as a 3-year solution or a 4-year, 5-year, whatever the warranty pack was, because actually I want to ingrain in my client the fact that this is a cyclical purchase. We're not going to put this in and hope it lasts 10 years. It's ideally a 3-year refresh model. So those are the sort of key points of friction that I always experienced. Anything to add to that, or any other frictions that you're resolving?
At the moment, I would say the supply chain right now is challenging, and that's being very polite. For all the years that I've been in this industry, there's always something that happens, whether it's, a tanker, gets stuck in the Suez Canal, which kind of blocks supply of everything, whether there's been an earthquake, whether there's been a flood, there's always something. But what we are facing right now in terms of the supply chain is a perfect storm in a perfect storm, wrapped in another perfect storm. An MSP asked me just yesterday evening, well, how long will it go on for? And truthfully, it's probably the first time that I've been able to say, do you know, I really don't know. And I can go into some of those challenges if you'd like me to. So firstly, you've obviously had Windows 10 end of life. So that saw a steady ramp up through the year. And of course, you saw a lot of it back-ended into September and the first week of October. So instantly, something as big as that is going to have an impact on supply. Then got, the newer processors, the newer generation, the Ultrabooks. The manufacturers out in the Far East have moved over to DDR5 manufacturing. But where you have had customers who are going to upgrade their devices, so they're already Windows 11, but they thought 8 gig of RAM was acceptable, and they've realized, well, actually, everything's grinding to a halt. I need 16 gig. It's running on DDR4. So a little bit like the beta and VHS. And what's being asked of the DDR5 factories is, can you scale down on your DDR5 manufacturing and scale back up almost from zero your DDR4? That doesn't happen overnight. So then you've got this big demand for DDR4, and you've still got huge demand for DDR5. It's the latest, newest technology. We love that. Everybody wants the new shiny thing. So from a RAM perspective, trying to get hold of 16 gig RAM right now on DDR4 is really challenging. I mean, we have orders on with the tier one suppliers out in the Far East, something like 70, 80, 90,000 pieces. You've also then got what that does in terms of price, because if you haven't got something, the demand for price goes through the roof. So a 16 gig stick of RAM 3-4 months ago, £36, for argument's sake. Now you're looking closer at 90. You've then got, wrapped up in that perfect storm, is SSDs. Start of the year, we knew from seeing memo notes from Samsung that they had lost money quarter on quarter, and they were going to start to starve the market and increase the price. We saw that happen really Q4 of last year, Q1, Q2. But now what you've seen is the rise in the big data centers. They want the big enterprise drives. So again, if you're Mr. Samsung or Mr. WD or Mrs. Samsung or Mrs. WD, who do you want to supply? Do you want to supply a 500 gig SSD, or do you want to supply, a drive for the data centers? So that's starving the market. They're chasing the big bucks, and you know what? If you were in their shoes, we'd probably do exactly the same. And then on top of that, you've got the traditional education refresh that happens every summer, which is a big pull on components. So that's the situation that we're in currently. And, it was interesting because I was introducing a brand new MSP to Terra and what we could do and how we could relieve pressure points. And I actually said on the call to them, now might not be a good time to start this relationship. Even though we've been trying to get this relationship up and running for maybe 4 or 5 months. And simply because I was saying to them, we have these pressures at the moment. We are building in excess of 4,000 bespoke build PCs every single day in our factory in Germany. But there is a backlog of builds. because one of our USPs has always been we can do a bespoke build for you in 2 or 3 days. Whether that's a server, whether that's a desktop, workstation, laptop, we can do that bespoke configuration for you. And right now we're not able to commit to that. And so it's frustrating because it feels like one of our USP has gone. But also it goes back to that understanding the MSP community and knowing that they would far more prefer honesty than, telling them something and then hiding.
Alicia, that's really useful to hear. I think 4 key points I think we pulled together around the challenges of logistics for something that people take for granted, I think. Certainly my experience was that clients and end users in general just take this for granted, right? They can just pop down into the PC World or whatever in town and just buy a laptop, right? So how come you just can't get me a laptop tomorrow? So all I was thinking when you were regaling us of these stories was, people need to be making notes around this. If they don't know this stuff already, they need to be writing this stuff down, and they need to be building some education points together really to present to their clients, to keep them informed of what's going on, to use this as reasons why they plan and why they need to have a plan. We can't necessarily just get what you want tomorrow because of all these global dynamics that are outside of our control. So how about we think ahead, we build it into our plan, our budgeting, and we stand a much greater chance then of delivering, to your needs and to your growth plan. So I think this is a key reminder really of, again, that, the pandemic was a brilliant example, the Suez Canal, another one, of things outside of our control. And actually, if we can just get ahead, if we can manage expectations with clients, tell them it's not necessarily as simple as they think it is, or it's not always as simple as they think it is. Therefore, let's just get ahead of it. And I think there's some real gold dust there just in this podcast on that alone.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it is very much that when we're talking to our MSPs, we are sharing this information. As I always say, we're at the pointy end because we are a manufacturer, because we have eyes and ears with the factories in the Far East. We know when this is coming down the pipe. Now, of course, when we get in touch with our MSPs, they're very much, well, we're not hearing this from anybody else. It's kind of like, well, no, because you're buying Lenovo and Dell via a distributor. They wouldn't have this level of intelligence. If you have a relationship with HP and Lenovo, they might not even have that level of intelligence. We knew we were just coming out of COVID and the coal fields in China had all flooded. And so a decree came down from the Chinese government that these factories that invariably they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because of their insatiable appetite for coal, and that's what fuels all these factories, well, you have to go down to 5 days a week, X number of hours a day. Now, the knock-on effect for that was it was just at the end of Chinese New Year. So a lot of the workers weren't going to go back to the factories because they travel hundreds and hundreds of miles. They're away from their families for long periods of time. We knew instantly that was happening. So we knew the impact that would start to have. But where we could be on the front foot and allow our MSPs to be on the front foot was telling them in advance of it. Start talking to your customers. What does your pipeline look like in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 weeks? And encouraging that. Don't just look at short term when it comes to devices, because we know they're down there on that priority list. Be ahead of the curve. Yeah. If a customer is saying we need installation here, well, when do we need to be working back from that?
And the old one was always, it's 3:00 on a Friday afternoon. Oh, could you get a laptop ready for us on Monday because we've got a new starter? That was the cliched issue. And I think this is really good. And, everybody should be setting these expectations.
Question on the RAM topic that you mentioned. How long ago was this change from 4 to 5? And so how forward thinking could you have been to avoid falling into that particular, and it's just one example of the supply constraint, but like if are we actually, historically, my view was always 3 years as a refresh. Is that too long? Should our forward-thinking MSPs be advising their forward-thinking clients that really you should be running a device for 2 years, maybe?
That's a really good question. DDR5 has probably been around for 6 or 7 months, and it's really just to do with the Intel chipset. The future-proofing your customers, which is a mantra that we use very much, is, say, for example, if we're looking at a high-end CAD machine, and we will look at the newest spec that we can provide. We won't look at, well, to save a few pounds, we use this GPU. We will look to future-proof. And I think that question about, how long do you have a device for? I don't think it's unreasonable that if you're spending X amount of pounds on a device, that you should expect that to last for 3 months. 3 months? Sorry, 3 years. God, I'd be very rich if it's 3 months. Sorry, slip of the tongue there. 3 years. But I think it's about, does the manufacturer that you're working with, does the brand that you have aligned yourself to, does their warranty cover that period of time? Because again, from an MSP perspective, having devices at your client site with no warranty is even more of a headache than the original procurement of that device. And whether that's, as you alluded to, oh, it's a Friday afternoon, we've got a new starter joining on a Monday, drop everything, go and find me a device. So I don't think it is unreasonable to expect devices to last 3 years, even in the industry where we are now, where things are just moving at such an incredible speed, and whether that's from a SaaS, a cyber, or a device perspective. No, I don't think that's unreasonable.
And therefore, future-proofing was a term that was used rampantly in the early days, but perhaps less so today. But if we can't necessarily be assured of being able to buy upgrade compatible components, does that mean that we need to spec higher in the first place? So you said like 8 gig was the issue, and really it's 16 or more. So should our MSPs be advising a higher specification in order to provide their end customers some additional wiggle room, so they're then not reliant on components being available or appropriately priced?
I would probably say in that instance, and I don't want it to be a blame game, but the tier ones have caused a lot of this supply chain issue. And going back to, the incredible volumes that they're selling, we have always gone out to future-proof. The baseline device out there is i5, 16 gig, 500. We have had that as our base model for 18 months. But what you have out there, again, going to the trying to hit a market share point, trying to race to the lowest price possible, you've got a lot of devices out there that are 8 gig and 250. Now, you can argue 250 gig SSD is adequate. Everything's in the cloud. But for us, that at the time of manufacture, the difference between a 250 and a 500 was minimal. So for us, as a manufacturer wanting to, put a stake in the ground and say, this is what we do, we don't take shortcuts. We don't use cheap components just to save $1 here or there. So it's the fact that there are all of these devices out there, which really in the first instance should never have been sold as an 8 gig device, honestly speaking. Of course, some of those 16 gigs are going where there are devices with 16 and they want to take it up to 32. But the reality is, you can't just blame the tier ones for it. Seeing this demand purely through, in my opinion, devices that should have been specced up from day one, rather than let's hit a price point, let's get to global market share number one, and to hell with it. That's some of the behavior, I believe, that sort of put us in this. It's another layer of the reason we're in this shortage at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So really what I'm hearing here is this is, as with all things, there's a degree of balance. Don't try and make a device last too long or too short a period of time. Specify appropriately, go above perhaps what you think the need is in order to give yourself some wiggle room. And in reality, all of these global trends and challenges are way outside of our individual control. And therefore, we should just be advising a moderate approach to this for MSPs and MSPs to their clients.
Yeah, that's a fair assumption. And again, if we see something that requires a minimum specification, as a trusted advisor with our MSPs, we ourselves will take that up. We will say, here's the minimum specification, but here's a step up option.
Mhm.
Again, allow us to be the experts in our field, an extension of an MSP's, whether it's a technical or sales engine. Let us be an extension of that. Let you do what you're good at, we'll do what we're good at. And with that, I think we have that's how we've built that community that we work with.
Just got one eye on the clock, and we touched on it, margin, earlier. So I just really like just to dig into that a little bit as well before we close the podcast. So what can you tell us about margin in the market?
Margin with us, I would say, is 20% plus because of the model that we have. If I see, an HP or Dell tender and, we're asked a lot of times, look, and the MSP will say, I've got no choice but to put HP or Dell in here. I don't want to. It's a race to zero. And that's the words coming from an MSP. So we chuck Terra in there to be that point of difference and give the MSP the motivation to promote Terra, because the chances are this end client's probably got 3 or 4 tenders that are going to come back to them with the generic HP, Dell, Lenovo device on there. What makes that stand out is, well, it's a conversation starter. Who's Terra? Who are they? The MSP can make the margin. The MSP knows that we're not going to sell direct. We will get directly involved if an MSP wants us to help with a client. And we've done that, numerous times, and we go there to support the MSP. So for us, margin has to be king. There has to be that opportunity to cover the costs. And for us, we focus heavily on how do we make sure our community make margin, because if you're making margin, guess what? You're going to come back for more.
And I think that's probably a great place to finish the episode, with the aspiration of 20% plus. And I'm sure there's plenty of MSPs listening to this that don't make 20%, and therefore that's really something to perhaps think about. And how can I do that and not have other issues or solve other problems along the way? So if anyone wants to carry on the conversation, how best to do that with you?
So they can either email me or just reach out to me via my mobile. I tend to be out on the road quite a lot at the moment. And I'd really welcome those conversations, really welcome those.
Brilliant. Very good. Okay. It's been a really interesting conversation. It feels like we're talking about quite a historical topic, but still absolutely relevant to today's MSP, TSP, MIP environment. So no, it's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you very much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.